Καλώς ήρθατε. Τι κάνεις, πώς είσαι, καιρό να σε δω. Πρωθυπουργέ, καλημέρα.
With a sponsorship of Alpha Bank, Eurobank, National Bank of Greece, and Piraeus Bank. Last year, Greece had done phenomenally well. That's continued. I think if you look at the statistics, in last year, The Economist named Greece Country of the Year. I quote, praising the country for taking tough economic reforms. If you go back to 2019 to middle of this year, the real GDP of Greece has grown by 8.5%. That's over twice the European average, and multiples more than very large countries that have seen very little growth like Germany. And last but not least, the Economist Intelligence Unit ranked Greece number 1 out of 34 OECD countries across 22-23 on a wide range of economic metrics. So we are incredibly privileged to have again this year the leader of the government that oversaw that period of economic performance, the Prime Minister of the Hellenic Republic, Mr. Κυριάκος Μητσοτάκης. So thank you for being here. I guess I'll start with a very high-level question on your vision for Greece. 35 years ago, your father had a vision for Greece of a modern country competing on the global scene. I think that view and that vision was ahead of its time. I think if you fast forward to today and all the things you've achieved, what do you think has worked really well to this date? What could work better? But more importantly, what is your vision for the next 35 years?
Well, first of all, thank you. Thank you very much for hosting me. This conference has become sort of an institution, and it seems to bring good luck to me and to the Greek economy. So, I'll keep coming as long as we do well, and I do anticipate that this trend that you described is going to continue. The question you ask is interesting, and let me start by offering an interesting, piece of statistics. And I do like to compare Greece to similar European countries of similar size. If you compare Greece to Ireland or Portugal, two countries of similar size that joined the European Union around the same time, it is very, very clear to me that in spite of the progress that we have made, we're a clear laggard. Ireland has done spectacularly well. Portugal has done much better than us. And in order to try to explain why this happened, I think we need to also look at the politics of Greece, the inability to forge the necessary consensus to take real steps to modernize the country, the fact that, of course, we suffered unnecessarily during the financial crisis because of political choices that were made. And I think that now we are in a position to actually make up for that lost ground and become a true sort of modern European country that also punches above its weight, that can make up the lost ground, but can also be a leader in sectors where we feel that we have a natural comparative advantage. And this fight between the forces that want to take Greece forward and those that actually were content with maintaining the status quo is a continuous fight. It's taking place also in many other countries. And if I were to sort of describe, my vision of Greece, I would use the example of the Thessaloniki Metro, which we inaugurated 2 days ago. A spectacular, public works project that went through lots of difficulties because there was lots of resistance by all sorts of forces that didn't want it to be built. It's a state-of-the-art metro that protects our cultural heritage. This, for me, is sort of an image of the Greece of the future. And we will remain fully committed to this path. I think we've made good progress so far. I think it is important not just to convince the financial community, the big companies, but also to ensure that the broader public is on board and that they understand that they will also have something real to benefit from this growth story that we're telling. This has not happened yet to the extent that we wanted for one simple reason, and that is cumulative inflation, which has essentially eroded the significant increases in wages and the reduction of taxes. But I do expect that the next 2 years are going to be rather different, and it is important for people to understand that they actually have a stake in this, so they can be part of this transformation story for the country, that they should not be afraid of change, and that in this sort of turbulent and confusing world, we provide the necessary stability and direction that the country needs.
Great. Well, actually, if we move from that to your current policy, you're now 1.5 years into your second term. Greece has continued to do extremely well on the path it was for some time. I thought I'd never say this, but you've also been immune from contagion from the rest of Europe. What a reversal over the years. As you look forward, what are your immediate focus and priorities for the country over the next couple of years?
First of all, who would have thought that Greece would risk to be contaminated by France and not the other way around? I mean, not many people would have expected this 4 or 5 years ago. Well, our priorities are very, very clear. The first is non-negotiable, and that is to make sure we maintain the fiscal stability, deliver on our budgetary commitments, stay within the expenditure benchmarks as they have been agreed with the European Union, and make sure that we focus on convincing the capital markets that Greece has left the difficult years behind us for good. I think this is something that the markets understand and appreciate. It is very much reflected in our spreads, but we know very well that we need to be vigilant, because there's always pressure to spend more, and we are now in a new fiscal framework, and we need to explain that not just to the markets. I think the markets understand it, but we need to explain that to our population, that the expenditure benchmark is fixed. So even if I bring in additional revenue, I cannot spend that revenue and go over the expenditure benchmark. What I can do is use structural changes in revenue collection to lower taxes. So if we continue, and we will continue to be successful in tackling tax evasion. This is a structural change. This is not a one-off tax. It's a structural change. And I can use whatever surplus I have to convince the European Union that I can use that to actually further lower taxes. So for me, this is a number one priority. The number two priority is to make sure that we use this stable fiscal position as a foundation to continue to focus on productive investment. Domestic investment, foreign investment. We have lots of important Greek companies here. We have provided them with the stability, the access to capital, also through the RRF loans, but also the opportunities to invest in the country. And if you look at, for example, manufacturing, our manufacturing is up 25% since 2019. It's pretty remarkable compared to what has happened in Europe. So this is not just, the Greek economy is not just a one-trick pony, meaning not just dependent on tourism. Leading, manufacturing companies that continue to invest in the country, because bridging the investment gap is critical. And the third, I think, very important challenge is to manage skills and technology. So we need to make sure that we are at the forefront of the AI revolution. And this is not just relevant for the state. I'll be having, a very interesting, 3-hour workshop with Tony Blair and Demis Hassabis, who is the Nobel laureate, working for Google to understand better how we can use AI to improve government policies. But this is also very relevant for the companies. For the big companies, to use AI to improve their productivity, for the ecosystem startup in Greece, and we'd like to see also, Greek technology companies that are interested in listing on the Athens Stock Exchange. We have a big opportunity there. And of course, in terms of skills, making sure that we have the labor force, proper labor force, to offer, companies that want to grow the talent to do so. There was an incredible event taking place in Amsterdam. Our Minister of Labor was there a couple of days ago, part of our Brain Regain initiative, where we had 1,000 Greeks in the broader region of the Benelux coming. Greek companies there recruiting. For Greek companies, this is a tremendous talent pool, convincing Greeks to come back. And of course, lots of other priorities. Healthcare is probably on the social side my number one priority, and I think we're leaders now in looking at health, not just through the perspective of sickness, treating sickness, but through prevention. Our prevention policies now in Greece, in terms of preliminary screening, are really cutting edge. Not many European countries do what we are doing on that front, and we're very proud of that.
Thank you. You mentioned AI, and we will come back to AI in a short while. One of the other big themes that inevitably is always on people's mind is green transition. This year we've witnessed extreme climate events that I think in the popular mind has brought back that issue to the fore. Whereas most of the developed world is lagging in delivering on the promises, I think Greece is a positive example of being on track on delivering on the NECP commitments. What are your thoughts around that theme, what Greece has done, and in particular what Greece can do in leading the debate and shape the debate in Europe and more globally?
Well, first of all, Greece is the European leader in reducing emissions. From 2005, we reduced our emissions by 45%. A big chunk of this is related to getting rid of coal in our electricity production. Of course, we produce more than 50% of our electricity from renewables, slightly higher if you also had our hydro capacity. And there's a lot of interest in further investing in renewables. We will continue to be leaders on that front. But we need to be very careful in Europe how we manage the green transition. We cannot afford to be leaders in the green transition and destroy our industry in the meantime. So balancing the green transition with strengthening our competitiveness is going to be absolutely critical. And if this means slightly reducing the glide slope towards reaching our emissions targets, so be it. We account for 6%. Europe accounts for 6% of global emissions. We cannot believe that we will solve the problem on our own. We need to look at what industry is telling us and ensure that industry remains competitive, especially in those hard-to-abate sectors where it is difficult to imagine that there are magical solutions that will allow them to decarbonize very, very quickly. And this debate is taking place in Europe. It's been also highlighted by the Draghi report. And there are lots of things we can do in that direction. The first most important investment we need to make is in our grids. We don't have a European energy market now. We think we have one, but we don't. I mean, if you just look at the disparity of prices, the market is clearly not working for structural reasons, for reasons that are related to how the target model actually works. And I think the number one priority for the Commission is to look how it will bring down energy costs for business and for consumers. And there are ways we can work towards that direction. The other aspect of climate, of the green transition, which does not receive enough attention, is adaptation. We've placed all our eggs in mitigation, setting very ambitious targets. And when we look at what's currently happening in terms of the climate crisis, it is clear that we need to be more resilient, and we need to be both proactive, but also make sure that we ensure that we can build back better in case of natural disasters. All countries have infrastructure that are not fit for purpose. In roads, yesterday, we got 80% of the rain that Valencia got. 80% of the rain that Valencia got. In roads, no weather model predicted it. No? So, and zero casualties. Why? Because we have a very, I think, well-tested system of early warning and telling people what they should do in case of natural disasters. So focusing more on smart adaptation, especially when it comes to issues such as water management, advanced weather forecasting models. This is an area where AI can really do miracles. I think we're very close to have global weather forecasting models using AI that are probably much better than we ever had. And this is absolutely critical in terms of at least protecting lives, because there's only that much you can do. And if people believe that you can build the infrastructure to cope with this amount of water, I mean, sorry, but that's not something you can do in a year or two. So we need to be better prepared and make sure that we focus on number one priority is protecting human lives. And this, after the Valencia disaster became, painfully clear.
It's difficult to talk about energy and energy transition adaptation without, focusing on what have been rising geopolitical tensions, but actually armed conflicts around the globe. As you think through those developing major themes and Greece's particular role in the middle of all of that, what are your thoughts?
This is, we have entered an era of sort of great geopolitical uncertainty. We have, a war in Ukraine that is clearly not going in the direction that we hope for. We have, a crisis in the Middle East where 3 days ago we were, more optimistic, after the ceasefire, and now we have a new crisis in Syria, and we need to see how this will unfold. Because of course we're always very concerned about not just about the plight of the country, it's horrible what has happened in Syria, but also about possible refugee flows. And Greece is a country that can act as a pillar of stability in a relatively turbulent part of the world. And of course, this gives us political and geopolitical leverage. We have a strong bilateral partnership with the US. I expect that not just to be maintained, but to be strengthened with the new Trump administration. I had a chance to speak to President Trump. I worked with him. We know his foreign policy team very well. I think there's a recognition that we have a role to play in the region. And of course, this is also, opening up, possibly new economic opportunities. Are we ambitious enough to look beyond the conflicts and prepare for that day? For example, do we aspire to play a role in the reconstruction of Ukraine? We should. As I told you before, we can already provide Ukraine with natural gas. When you look at the new sort of trade flows, the connection to India, IMEC corridor, I do expect, and I may sound, that at some point we can see a potential for a grand deal to resolve the Middle East crisis, in spite of everything that has happened. And I think the new US administration, if it plays its cards smartly, can move in that direction. That is going to be transformational. The stability in the region, the connection to India, and Greece as the closest continental country to what I think is the country that offers the most potential in terms of connections to Greece, and that is India. So this is not just about us acting as a trusted partner when it comes to geopolitics, because we talk to everyone and everyone respects us. It's also about the potential opportunities that can emerge if we look beyond the current crisis. So we need to prepare both for the worst, but also get ready for the possible opportunities that may emerge.
You mentioned the United States. Obviously, the world, half of the world has voted this year in one shape or another. The United States has new leadership, this constant information flow coming out of China. And within Europe, voices, calling for more urgent reforms, including my fellow national Mario Draghi. As you look at the position of Europe in the middle of those moving tectonic plates, how do you see Europe going forward, and what are the things that maybe from your Greek experience you can contribute to that debate?
implement the Draghi report. It's, for those of you who have not read it, it's a great reading, and it highlights both the problems that we face, but also the opportunities that we need to address. The problem in Europe is twofold. On the one hand, it is a problem of excessive regulation. I think this is something which is recognized. Not making it easy for companies to operate in Europe. You are a tech startup, for example, and do you really have access to a single market? No, because you have 27 different regimes. So this idea of this 28th European regime for startups, I think is extremely interesting. Complicated to implement, but very, very interesting. No surprise they moved to the US. Capital Markets Union. Does anyone really want to list if you're a booming startup? I mean, right now, you're either going to move to the US or going to get venture capital from the US, which is primarily European taxpayers sending their money to the US to reinvest that in Europe. So Capital Markets Union for me is absolutely critical. We've been talking about it for 10 years. Now is a chance to actually make it happen. And this means overcoming objections by certain specific member states. I spoke about energy and the financing of European public goods. And of course, defense is a big topic. And Greece is doing its fair share of its part. We spend more than 3% on defense. But are we going to be able to mobilize European funds for defense? Interestingly enough, I saw this morning that the Prime Minister of Denmark is a traditionally frugal country. So they've been traditionally rather opposed to common debt, said yes to European common borrowing for defense purposes. Right now, if we were serious, we would say, okay, we did 750 billion for the COVID recovery. Why can't we do 100 billion for a dedicated defense fund that will also focus on developing European technology? We have technology in Europe. We end up buying systems from abroad. It's inconceivable to me that we cannot develop the European technology for missile defense, which has proven to be absolutely critical. It will strengthen NATO, but we need to make sure that such an investment also has, more European content. So these are some of the bold decisions that we need to take. Two observations. The Commission is on board, and the mood in the Council is changing. So on the other hand, the headwinds are significant, but the threat of gradually gliding towards geopolitical irrelevance is real. And I think it's at least been accepted by my colleagues at the European Council.
Let me pick you on the second theme you mentioned, which is immigration. You took early on, around 2020, a fairly tough stance on illegal immigration at a time when it might not have been as popular or accepted as it is now. You mentioned for Greece that's no longer necessarily at the top end of people's concerns. Events over the last few days, obviously, across Europe will fuel again concerns and preoccupation. But as you think through what has been your success in putting forward some of your initiatives, are there things that you still have on your agenda, and are there some helpful lessons that other European countries could take advantage of?
Our biggest success has been to move the European Union towards our position on immigration. Because you're right, when in 2020 we're faced with the first instance of weaponization of mass migratory flows, we were very tough and we did the right thing. Poland is faced with a very similar situation now on its border with Belarus, and the same may be happening in Finland or in the Baltic countries. So protecting your border and making sure that you decide who comes into the country and not the smugglers is critical. If you have a sea border, it is more difficult. You always need to be very careful, and we've saved thousands of people, but this does not mean we make it easy for boats to get into our territorial waters. We will make it difficult for the smugglers, and that's the only way to break the model. If someone pays in advance and cannot get through, then he'll have difficulties recruiting new clients. But this is only part of the story. We need returns. Returns have not happened yet. So for those whose asylum applications are declined, they end up in one way or another staying in Europe, and this is a big problem. And this should be a European project. And we need to use European leverage. We cannot have, for example, preferential arrangements with countries and not use the leverage that we have in order to tell them that they need to accept returns. And of course, we also need a proper and more sort of, I think, ambitious agenda when it comes to legal migration. We're doing that with countries such as Egypt for construction workers or agricultural workers, India, the Philippines. There are already shortages of labor. And we need to be more open in terms of offering people the opportunity to work in Greece, but on our own terms, and make sure that they travel legally and safely.
This is an investing audience, so I would be remiss if I don't ask you about technology and AI, and how you see Europe and Greece's position within that, the overwhelming view, which you hinted at earlier, being that Europe is certainly lagging behind the United States and China. How are you thinking about technology and AI and all those developments from a European standpoint and a Greek standpoint?
We have just published our AI strategy. For those interested, it's a document worthwhile reading because it has been put together by an excellent team of AI experts from abroad, and is really very thoughtful and very realistic in terms of what we can do. I mean, what can Greece offer? First of all, what are the advantages that we have when it comes to AI? We have a large number of AI scientists abroad who do cutting-edge work when it comes to AI, who would like in some way, shape, or form get involved with what's happening in Greece. We have a booming ecosystem of startups in Greece focused on AI. We have a government that understands that putting in place a proper and attractive regulatory framework within the AI Act could be a comparative advantage. We have centrally managed data because we have a Ministry of Digital Transformation which oversees our data policy, and data is critical when it comes to AI. So healthcare data or climate data, these are data sets which, if properly curated, can actually be of great use. We are bidding to be one of the 7 AI factories. The tenders have been put in place, which will give us access to significant European funding when it comes to AI. We're building our first Greek supercomputer, and we're an attractive destination for data centers. Many of them are already in the process of being built, and of course we'll also need renewable energy in order to supply them. And I think on the softer sort of sides, but still very, very important, given our heritage, we should be leaders in the space which sort of bridges ethics and AI. So we have that additional advantage that we can be the central focal point for these discussions, which are incredibly interesting, not just thought-provoking intellectually, but at some point would also lead to regulation in terms of protecting us from the negative aspects of AI. So I think this is a pretty good sort of set of pieces that constitute a country that has thought about this and can possibly punch above its weight when it comes to AI. And of course, we have many companies, I need to point that out, large companies, who we would like to help also by accessing European funding that can play a critical role in terms of using AI to improve their processes, and a government that is ready to do that. So for example, we already use AI to scan legal contracts. And it's incredible how much time you can actually save. So think of AI as who's developing the technology. Difficult to imagine that anyone will compete with the American hyperscalers. But how do we apply AI is critical. I mean, and for every company how to use AI to improve productivity is something which should be of concern, certainly to the companies that are present here.
Before, and we'll probably have time in a very short while for one or two questions from the audience, if there are any, but last year, what we did very rapidly was ask you to answer a rapid fire of questions just to understand the person behind the leader. If you're up for it, I'll go through a series again. I promise it won't put you on the spot.
I thought the first rapid question would be, will you tax the banks or not?
I think I've heard that the answer is you won't.
Yes, the answer is we expect a lot of things from the banks, but an extraordinary tax is not in the cards. Yeah.
And I'd like to claim that you needed a lot of convincing, but that wasn't the case. Yeah. So the banks can sleep soundly. If you have to drink coffee or tea?
Or coffee.
Read a book or watch a movie?
I read a book.
Early bird or night owl?
Definitely early bird.
So sunrise or sunset?
Sunrise.
Shopping in store or online?
Of course in store.
Music, classical or rock?
The second?
Phone call or email WhatsApp?
Well, WhatsApp combines the best of both worlds.
And the final one, which is probably the toughest, basketball or cycling?
Well, for the moment, none, but hopefully both once fight back is better. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.